Well, I have a sneaky suspicion Miami will want to leave the ACC, but who would they take with them?
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. Realignment, coaching carousel, the portal, all that and more. We've always got you covered. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That is why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. The Pac-12 is getting help from basketball. Yeah, we'll talk about that coming up on the show. And DJ Uiagalelei at Florida State. Is he good enough? Is he good enough? Well, that depends on what the good enough actually means. But let's start with the ACC. So Florida State and Clemson are suing the ACC. We don't know what the outcome of those lawsuits are going to be. My spidey sense tells me they're going to find a way to move because, well, that's just the way that realignment is tended to go. Consolidation towards the Power 2 conferences when there's a desire to make it happen, and those two universities clearly have that desire. Now, Miami is just waiting in the wings, maybe waiting to see, well, what's the exit fee? What does it cost? Should we just, wait until maybe ESPN decides to back out of the 2027 or the media rights deal with the ACC in 2027? Should they just sit back and, wait and see what happens, or do they need to be proactive? Well, if they do, they have to find somebody to go with them. And I think NC State, Virginia, and wait for it, Georgia Tech are all intriguing options for various reasons. Now, the clear answer to this question of who should they want to take with them if they were to, say, try to get into the Big Ten is Notre Dame. And frankly, the answer to that question of who should they take with them is Notre Dame if they want to go to the SEC. Whichever conference they choose, Notre Dame is the clear-cut option. The problem is that the Fighting Irish have continued to be adamant that they want to be an independent. They want to be their own deal. And you know what? I don't think if you're Miami, you can pick up the phone and be influential enough to tell Notre Dame what to do. Because the Big Ten, I think at some level, wants Notre Dame. The Big Ten's got a lot more sway in this realignment space as a conference than Miami does as an individual university. So if you're Miami, you have to think about, okay, who do you want to take with? Because realignment moves don't happen in odd numbers. Doesn't make any sense, makes things hard with a conference. You have to have a travel partner, all sorts of logistical matters as to why that has to be the case. But Virginia is intriguing because academically speaking, I'll get to Georgia Tech in just a moment, but culturally, academically speaking, Virginia to me feels like a Big Ten school. That could be an option, and that could be appealing to Miami. So too could North Carolina, and then we'll get to NC State and the argument there. And the argument in favor, if you're Miami, of bringing along either North Carolina or Virginia is the Big Ten will take them if that's the conference where you are looking to go, which I think is the more logical spot. Just a spidey sense that I've got. I'm not Tom Holland, don't worry. I would never try to be that awesome or think that I possibly could be because he's utterly fantastic. Okay, Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield also have many redeeming qualities. Maguire is my favorite Spider-Man. Okay, I'm done. I am done. I promise. If you look at Virginia and say, okay, will you take us if we bring along Virginia as well? And the Big Ten says, yeah, okay, we'd do that. If you're Miami, have they been at the level consistently that they should be as a football program? No, it's been a long time since the glory days. But do you feel like you have a better chance to compete annually than Virginia? Boy, I hope so. And if you're going into a new league, you know what you want to have in that league? A chance to compete. And so the argument against bringing a North Carolina or an NC State, and North Carolina would be the more logical of those two options if you're going to the Big Ten for sure. The argument against that is North Carolina has proved to be consistently a stronger program than Virginia. Now, the Cavaliers have popped up every now and then in Orange Bowl once upon a time, in an ACC title game appearance. They've had their moments, but overall, who do you feel more confident in as a university? And certainly if you wanted to talk about basketball, but this is Locked On College Football, and we'll talk about more basketball than maybe I should a little bit later in the show. But if you just are talking about football, university commitment, athletic brand, North Carolina is certainly stronger than Virginia. So too is NC State. NC State has been just a steady, solid, consistent program. Now that's one argument, right? We want to bring somebody with us who the Big Ten will say yes to, but who we feel is not going to hold us back. Because whoever you bring with, you're going to play regularly. USC, UCLA, Big Ten, they're going to play every year. Oregon, Washington, Big Ten, play every year. Maryland, Rutgers, go to the Big Ten. Pretty sure, someone could double check me on this, that those two schools play every year. Like, when these moves take place, those two schools are always going to be joined at the hip. Colorado and Utah in the Pac-12, once upon a time, RIP, for instance, all of that. So I think that those are the contrasting arguments. Now, the argument in favor of a school like NC State would be if you want to make a pitch to the Big Ten of, we're going to make this the best conference possible. We're bringing ourselves, and here's what we bring to the table, and we're going to bring NC State as well. Would you get NC State over North Carolina? Probably not. Now, I mentioned Georgia Tech earlier. Why do I mention Georgia Tech? Well, that's a university that more than most people probably realize academically and culturally and such, but on the academic side of things, remember, presidents vote on realignment, not athletic directors, but they're involved in the decision-making process, to be sure. Has Georgia Tech football been amazing? No. But is Georgia Tech the sort of research university that the Big Ten strives to have? Absolutely. USC, UCLA, and Washington, by the way, all big research AAU institutions. And Georgia Tech, yeah, that's a bigger research institution than most people would probably realize. How much the Big Ten is valuing that in this sort of move, that's up to Tony Petitti and the rest of the Big Ten presidents in the conference. But Georgia Tech it's just interesting. I thought of it because, man, that's in the part of the country where you have, wait for it, a lot of really talented football players. The most talented recruits in the country, they come from California, Texas, Florida, and then the South. If the Big Ten saw going into Miami as, like, let's say Florida State and Clemson went SEC and the Big Ten was having to make a move, which is where this hypothetical would probably land us here, would Georgia Tech be an option? Maybe. And you know what? Do I look at Georgia Tech and think, boy, high-level football program, high-level athletics, they're doing big stuff all the time? No, I do not. But the SEC's got Vanderbilt, so I'm sorry, Vanderbilt. I mean, they go through the ringer in this sort of space, don't they? I mean, it's just the way that things are for the Commodores on the football field. They've got baseball, though. Vanderbilt baseball, I think, kind of rescues Vanderbilt fans and the Vanderbilt faithful for, what they have to go through with basketball and football, which, it's rather tough. But I don't think Georgia Tech is a likely option. I think that Miami has to decide, do we want to go with someone who we feel we are superior to on the football field consistently, who the Big Ten will also accept, or do we need to go and make the strong pitch? And this will depend on a lot of different factors in the realignment conversations that get had between presidents and commissioners and everybody of the sort. Do we want to bring in someone who is the strongest football program? Or is there a blend of the two? Because if you're looking for the next strongest football program, I can make a pretty solid argument for NC State. But if you want a blend of the two, then it's North Carolina. But if you want just someone that the Big Ten will say yes to, that you feel like you're better than, well, then Georgia Tech or Virginia get tossed into the mix. I probably don't have to tell you this, but drop your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter, at SMcLaughlinCFB, to let me know what you all think. I think the Pac-12 had a great weekend. In fact, I know the Pac-12 had a great weekend. I mean, we all did for various reasons, but the Pac-12 had a great weekend. Nissan drivers are always having a great weekend. Why? Because Nissan is superb. And this week's March Madness Bracket Highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest, just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs. These guys were able to take it to the next level. The North Carolina Tar Heels are the Nissan Armada. The 1 seed is as hardcore as it gets out there, and they've secured a spot in the Sweet 16 to face Alabama. in the NCAA tournament. They're a favorite pick by many to make a run for a championship. I think they get to that game. The Iowa State Cyclones are the Pathfinder. They've been thrilling to watch and have really created a lane for themselves. They'll face off with Illinois in the Sweet 16. How about the NC State Wolfpack? Speaking of Dave Doran's team, same athletic department there. They are obviously this week's Nissan Rogue, the team that absolutely surprised us all with a powerful performance in their first 2 games in the tournament. Wins over Texas Tech and Oakland have set them up to play Marquette in the Sweet 16. They say win life, go Rogue, and that is what the Golden Grizzlies have done right here. The Wolfpack, I should say. The Wolfpack have done that here. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop at nissanusa.com. This episode also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. That's America's #1 sportsbook right away. Is your bracket busted? Mine is, but guess what? You can say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. I've got Houston. As I record this show, Houston just escaped in overtime against Texas A&M. What a ball game that was to watch. And I think the Cougars are going all the way. So make sure you go check out FanDuel and bet on it at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. FanDuel.com/lockedon, America's #1 sportsbook, and official partner here at the Locked On Network. So the Pac-12 had a good weekend. Not that they, I'm talking on the football field, by the way, sort of indirectly, in totality, on the whole. You understand where I'm going here. The Pac-12 saw a lot of Pac-12 teams win NCAA tournament games. You had Colorado win a first 4 game. You had Colorado beat Florida. You had Oregon beat Creighton. Washington State took care of Drake, who was a popular upset pick. It was a really good time. The Pac-12 began 6-0 in the tournament. Arizona is in the Sweet 16. They've got a matchup with Clemson looming. If Arizona wins that game, they will contribute more money to the Pac-12 slush fund here. So the conference, I think, is, with a variety of factors, whether it's the 2-year contract for the new commissioner, Teresa Gould, or the expiration in 2 years of the Mountain West media rights contract with Fox Sports and CBS, or the 2-year scheduling arrangement with the Mountain West in football, or the 2-year affiliation with the West Coast Conference for your non-revenue sports. Pac-12 is lining up to make some sort of move in a 2-year time span. And they need to accumulate a war chest as big as possible. They got $255 million from the departing 10 Pac-12 schools as a settlement. And then the NCAA tournament has rolled around. Now, this money gets paid out over the course of several years, but still. That war chest picked up $20 million and counting, depending on how Arizona does, for the Pac-12, meaning that they have just further solidified their footing. And I think that is a great place to be. If you're Oregon State and Washington State's presidents, you're sitting back with your feet up. Maybe you're at a beach somewhere right now just hanging out and going, men's basketball team got to the round of 32 at Washington State. Women's basketball teams in the Sweet 16 at Oregon State. Boy, we sure are proving that we can compete with all the big brands and all the big teams out there and compete at a national level, which of course, we all know to be true. So this is good financial news. Good financial news for the Pac-12 to add $20 million in there. It's a non-zero number. I mean, you're increasing by about 10% what that war chest previously was. And there are payments and there are disputes and there are all sorts of uses for that money. But primarily, it is going to go towards keeping their athletic departments funded at a Power 5 level, which has been their stated goal. And this money will certainly allow them to, continue along that sort of path and one day rebuild the conference. You got to pay exit fees. You might have to give a school some money because the media rights deal isn't enough. There are all sorts of ways that you can use that cash. And I think that's great for the Pac-12, but the question is what happens now, right? This has been a great sequence. If Arizona makes a run, it'll be a couple more $1 million. That's all good and fine. You can have coaching salaries at a competitive level. You can have money in reserve if you need it here, if you need it there, or whatever, right? But I think there's a next step for the Pac-12. There's a next step. And of course, this is the Pac-2. Teresa Gould, the commissioner, refers to as the Pac-12 because, that's what it will be again one day. Maybe not 12, but maybe 10. I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. I certainly will be around for that, and I hope you will be too. But the next step for them is to further establish their credibility in the eyes of the entire country, all the athletic departments and the conferences, but I think also in the eyes of recruits, of players. So if you're going to be able to attract coaches and assistant coaches of a certain caliber because you have this money in your athletic department, that's great. But if the pitch to those athletes is not strong enough, you're going to eventually see a diminished roster compared to what you were once able to obtain. Now, for these two particular schools, neither one is accustomed to being a recruiting power. But in the transfer portal era, this is, I think, a very, very real thing. And so having the credibility to rebuild your league as you see fit is one thing. But having the credibility with everybody else is another. And that's why I think this upcoming season for Oregon State and Washington State is so darn important. Because I might be breaking news here. You only get one chance to make a first impression. And so Oregon State, I know, crazy, right? Oregon State and Washington State are going about this Mountain West scheduling partnership and making the best of a bad situation. But if they go out and make the best of that on the field, well, suddenly that might turn a head or two or three or four. I don't know how many heads it'll turn. But I know if you make as much noise as possible, that's going to help you sustain success. And that, I think, is step one towards getting what their long-term goal ultimately is, which is an invite to a Power 4 conference. Now, we may just be, destined to head towards a Power 2 and, the Big 12 and the ACC could be gone in 10 to 15 years. They might not. They might be able to stick around. But still, if you're Oregon State and Washington State, your long-term goal is to get into the Big 12. You know how you do that? You build the premier Group of 5 conference in all of college football, and you win as many games as you possibly can. You make yourself so attractive to other conferences that they can't say no, that they have to look at them and say, oh man, if we're adding teams, those teams have to be at the top of the list, irrespective of the size of their school or what kind of academic standing they have or what their television market is. We just got to have that football program. Man, it's been humming. It's been great. So if they're stabilizing themselves, as I mentioned, financially, but now that's got to translate on the field. That's got to translate on the field. Our friends at FanDuel have not posted a win total for Oregon State and Washington State. I wish they would. I'd be very curious. I imagine for both schools, it would be fairly high. Now, last year, Oregon State certainly had a better roster than the one they will put on the field this year. Washington State's, I think, is more comparable. I don't think Washington State has had as big of a drawback of talent compared to Oregon State. But I think that for the Beavs and Cougs, both, coaching staffs, you have Trent Bray, who was a defense coordinator with the Beavs for the last couple of years and did a fantastic job. Both coaches understand how to get the most out of the guys that they are able to get in there. But if you want to show everyone else that you are worthy, it's got to be done on the football field. Basketball is great, and getting the money is great. But at the end of the day, a round of 32 appearance from Washington State men's basketball, a phenomenal achievement that may very well, unfortunately, lead to Kyle Smith, their coach, being pulled away by a bigger school. Stanford is reportedly going to be interested in him. And you talk about a school that is particularly happy to be getting an influx of money. That'd be Washington State. They don't want to lose their basketball coach there. But what they do want to do is showcase to everybody else, we are the best realignment targets out west. And I think if I were Oregon State, I would just, get a paper copy of that lawsuit that Florida State brought against the ACC and just kind of manually snip out the part where the Seminoles allege that the ACC missed the point of realignment by adding Cal and Stanford and SMU instead of a school like Oregon State, who's had more success over the last several years. You want to have those little feathers in your cap. You want to have people think of your school, your football program specifically, and think about what they're capable of, about not how they're struggling, not how they're fighting, not how bad you feel. At some level, you maybe want to have people. No, actually, I take that back. You don't want to have that at all. Look, there was a time for sympathy. I think it's kind of come and gone. You have to move forward. You have to be aggressive. You have to be proactive, forward thinking, and you've got to be able to create an impression to everybody in the sports landscape of this is utterly ridiculous, right? Because initially it was, well, this is ridiculous and I feel bad for him, which I do. But now you want to make a perception of your football programs that goes like this. We think this is ridiculous, whoever we may be. University presidents, conference commissioners, media folks, it all contributes. It all feeds into one big pot, and all this sort of stuff gets filtered around and such. You want people to think your programs and think that is ridiculous that they're left behind. They're too good. They're too good to not be up at this level. So that, I think, is the next step for the Pac-12 as they continue to solidify themselves financially. Florida State, speaking of the Seminoles, they have a new quarterback. You remember who it is? We need to talk about him. First, we need to talk about our friends over at LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board, by the way. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing a lot of hats, and that's why over 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring, because they know you might not have the time or resources to hire. Post your job for free over at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. DJ Uiagalelei is going into his third school in 3 years at Florida State this season. It'll be, as I understand it, eligibility is weird, but his final year of eligibility for college football. And he goes to the Seminoles to replace Jordan Travis, step in and be the starter. And I got to thinking about this because these are the sorts of things I ponder at any random moment in the day. I could be out for a walk on the golf course. I don't go for walks unless it's on the golf course. Usually, generally speaking, it could be in the shower, could be making dinner, eating breakfast, whenever. This thought popped into my head. Is DJ Uiagalelei good enough to get Florida State to the playoff? See, I asked the question earlier in the show, is he good enough? Well, that depends on what you're asking. Because if you're going to ask DJ Uiagalelei to be the focal point of your offense, if you're going to run everything through him and try to turn him into a Heisman caliber quarterback, I have news for you. He's not good enough to do that. There is a proven track record here, and I do not see, though Florida State has had a superb 4th-ranked talent composite ranking for their transfer portal class, according to 24/7 Sports, well-deserved when you look at the number and caliber of players that they've brought in. I do not feel, even with that much talent, that DJU, I don't think if you put him on last year's team, he's a Heisman contender the way that Jordan Travis was. DJU's been a starter in college football for 3 years. He has had one season in which he completed over 60% of his passes. It was the 2022 season with Clemson. He was benched multiple times throughout that year, by the way, and then transferred to Oregon State, where he went to an offense that is certainly quarterback friendly in the sense that it is a very defined offense with the reads that Jonathan Smith and his OC Brian Lindgren, who are now up at Michigan State in East Lansing, with Aiden Childs, of course. When you look at what they ask their quarterbacks to do, it's not a ton. It's not as if, everything's tailor-made easy, but it's more like the Shanahan offense than it is the air raid offense, shall we say. There's a lot of play action, defined throws, simple concepts, 2-man routes. DJU did not hit 60% of his passes last year. He threw for 219 yards a game. He had 20 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. Now, over the last 2 years, he has 42 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. For those of us who are math majors, that I'm not, but some of you out there may be. And you know what? That's all good and fine. I hope you're doing great. 3-1. It's a 3-1 touchdown interception ratio. It's fine. It's fine. It's not great. It's not great, but it's not bad. It's not bad. And that's what DJ Uiagalelei is. So when I think about Florida State and the fact that they are tied with Clemson as the betting favorite to win the ACC this year, I think about how that is putting a lot of faith, which is frankly deserved, in Mike Norvell and the rest of the Florida State team, in the rest of the Florida State coaching staff. Because last year in 11 games, Jordan Travis was throwing for 250 yards a game, and he had a touchdown interception ratio of 20-2. DJU's not going to do that. Jordan Travis, I think, is a more talented quarterback, and he had better weapons. There are going to be good weapons on this Florida State team. Make no mistake about it. But I wonder about the ground game, because the reason that DJU was a good fit on paper, and it's not as if it went poorly in Corvallis. They were 8-4, lost a couple of close games, most notably to Washington at home in week 11 or week 12, whatever it was. That was a game where Oregon State was 8-2. They were ranked, I think, 12th in the country at the time. Washington was inside the top 10, and they barely lost the game. And the difference was that Michael Penix outplayed DJU. So I just think there's such a big track record that we know what he is and shouldn't expect him to be something else. But Florida State was a playoff team last year when Jordan Travis was at the helm, who was throwing for more yards a game and didn't turn the ball over as much and had a better completion percentage. And DJU was at a team where he wasn't asked to do as much. Is he going to be asked to do the same amount as Jordan Travis? If so, then the ACC might be more open than you think. Names to know for the Seminoles going into this year. TJ Ferguson, transferred from Alabama, former 4-star recruit, grades as much according to 24/7 Sports in the transfer portal, interior offensive lineman. He, along with other big fellas up front, are going to be important because Roydell Williams is the running back they brought in, also from the University of Alabama. That's going to be essential. You cannot give DJU the keys to an offense and say, we need you to throw, 35, 40 times a game. That's not where he's at his best. Can he be better than what he had last year? Yeah, I think the wide receiving core he'll have at Florida State this year is better than what he had at Oregon State a season ago. I think in that sense, it's an upgrade. But DJU was at his best last year when he was able to throw off play action, when he had a ground game, when he wasn't asked to carry the offense. When he had to do that at Clemson, it was a little bit of a struggle. And they went with Cade Klubnik instead. So I think that this is one of the most interesting components, maybe the most interesting component for Florida State, is you have a capable quarterback. DJ Uiagalelei is absolutely, without a doubt, a starting caliber quarterback at the power level of college football. We've seen that. He's won games. He's been in big spots. He's thrown for a decent amount of yards. He's thrown for a lot of touchdowns. He can run a little bit. But is he Jordan Travis? No, he cannot be Jordan Travis. Meaning a roster for Florida State that lost a lot of NFL talent. A couple of receivers, Jared Verse along the defensive line, just to name a few. They've replaced a lot of those guys with people on paper that fit, that are a talent match to make it the same caliber team. But even if you have the same caliber of team, you do not have the same caliber of quarterback. And so for DJ Uiagalelei, he has to go out there and be himself, and that's good enough to get Florida State into the ACC championship game and into the playoff. But once he gets there, once he gets to those big games, let's say Florida State is playing Miami. Same win total, according to our friends at FanDuel, by the way. 9.5, the Hurricanes and the Seminoles. If the ACC title game is Florida State and Miami, look, I need to watch the teams for an entire season before I make a pick on that game. But do you know what I know right now? I think Norvell's a better in-game coach than Mario Cristobal. But I think that Cam Ward is a better quarterback than DJU. So when you get to the high-level games, will DJU hit his ceiling? Will he be out-quarterbacked? Will he be outplayed? Because he can be. Because a lot of teams that get to that sort of level, conference championship games or 12-team playoff games and everything of the sorts, they're going to oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes have very high-level quarterback play. And when you go into a game with a deficit at that position, it can be a lot harder to win. Not impossible, but it can be harder. So expecting him to be something he's not is not where my head would be if I were a Florida State fan. And I think that for Mike Norvell and the Seminoles, they have got to be able to craft an offense that allows him to succeed without asking him to do too much. I think he's got better resources in some ways than what he had at Oregon State last year. Does that mean he'll be a better player on the field? Time will tell. We're almost to the end of March, which means we're almost to April, which is, adjacent to May, June, July, August. We got a ways to go before the season. It'll be here before you know it. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.